My wife only had one request of me when we found out I was never going to get better. Today we're going to talk about bitterness and chronic pain. Good morning and welcome to the Chronic Pain Call-In Show, the only show about chronic pain where you can call in live. I'm your host, Joseph of Borg. I'm here every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. I look forward to talking to you. Okay, so beginning again, my wife told me when she first found out I was never going to get better that she hoped I didn't get bitter. I didn't realize at that time how wise of a comment that was. There's no sense in me just giving you that information without giving you some background. I had been battling lumbar issues for many years in my lumbar spine that were inoperable. I had had my second round of RFAs. Um, I decided not to go forward with more of those. They worked, but my insurance required 2 rounds of branch blocks as a diagnostic every time I was going to have them done. They were doing 8 locations at a time, so that meant 24 needles to the spine every time I had it done. That was a lot of needle traffic. I also got caught up in a highly unlikely situation that made me a little phobic of having further spinal injections. I got uh, injected with the contaminated steroids back in 2012 from the New England Compounding Center, who has since been sued out of existence. So that left a bad taste in my mouth, needless to say, when I came home one day and opened a letter from the CDC and I had to get a spinal tap and have a culture. And at that point, it was on the news daily. People were dying from encephalitis and meningitis from these contaminated steroids. Like I said, it's never going to happen because again because they were sued out of existence. But that's one of the things that made me decide to get the spinal cord stimulator. Now, while I was waiting to get my trial for my spinal cord stimulator, for those of you who are unfamiliar, I was a casino dealer for much of my life. I woke up one morning and from about mid forearm down, my hands were numb, for lack of a better term. It felt like I had oven mitts on. Needless to say, it makes it very difficult to deal cards. Um, First thing they thought, of course, me being a big guy and numbness, nerve problems in the hands, was that it was something related to diabetes. They did my A1C, which was in the fives, so that definitely wasn't it. Um, we did some imaging of my spine, saw where the problem was in my cervical spine. Um, they sent me for a CT myelogram to see if it could even be repaired or not. Yes, I do have arachnoiditis, Michelle. Um, they found it couldn't be repaired and it was only going to get worse over time. It affects me bilaterally, cervical levels 3, 4, 5, and 6. Um, we put off surgery as long as possible. In 2015, I had surgery to fuse 3 of the levels in my cervical spine, basically to buy me time. For those of you who aren't familiar with cervical anatomy, C4, 5, and 6, especially 4 and 5, are breathing, bladder, bowel control, and all 4 limbs pass through that general area. So they told me my long-term prognosis was full C4 paralysis. For those of you who don't know what that means, think Christopher Reeves for an example. So, with that heaped on my plate, in addition to my cervical issues, um, or excuse me, in addition to my lumbar issues, it was pretty defeating because I thought I was really close to fixing or at least making things manageable for my lumbar issues with the spinal cord stimulator, which ended up being a huge success for my lumbar issues, by the way. I'm kind of the poster boy for SCS success. But on top of all that, just as I thought there was some hope for my low back issues, I've got the news about my cervical issues. And that's when my wife told me, I just hope you don't get bitter. And it chokes me up a little bit thinking about it, so forgive me. But bitterness and chronic pain tend to want to go hand in hand. Um, and there's some really good reasons why, and there's some really good reasons to avoid it. And I just thought today that would make a really good topic. So, basically, doing a little bit of reading on bitterness, or another term for it is resentment. Um, it really comes from, they say two, and I think maybe three sources as a rule. There's a feeling of injustice will make you bitter or resentful. Um, I believe it can be a reaction or a defense mechanism to fear. Um, can make you bitter or resentful. Um, the injustice, the fear, um, the I sorry, I'm drawing a blank on what they said the other one. Basically, it was a spin-off of Injustice, um, and it the little bit of reading I did about really talked about don't ruminate, don't meditate, don't focus on the injustice of it. Don't. I say this as if I don't mean to be flip. I know this is a difficult thing. I'm not suggesting it's an easy thing. But if you really meditate and really fixate on the why me, um, it's not fair, uh, what did I do to deserve this? My belief system doesn't allow for the fact that I did something bad, so therefore God's punishing me by giving me this pain. I don't believe that it works that way. Um, it's very easy to get caught up in it because there is no reason why you. I guess the flip side of that question has always been to me, why not you? Or in my case, why not me? What does somebody else do to deserve it? Um, a lot of people suffer for things that aren't their fault, and suffer in multiple ways. It's not just that somebody should lose a child, or when we lose a parent or a loved one, or maybe you lose all your worldly possessions. There's a lot of unjust things that happen in the world to all of us. None of us have a monopoly on suffering and adversity. And I try to keep in mind that the worst thing you've been through is the worst thing you know. You don't understand. I often talk about this with chronic pain. So many of us get hung up with and frustrated by um, people not really understanding. Even our loved ones and those closest to us don't really understand. Um, they can't understand until it's happened to you. It's like the birth of a child, death of a parent, a divorce. It's a life experience that until you've had it and been through it, you can't understand it or truly appreciate it. Um, Frustration, I think, contributes to a lot of people getting angry and bitterness. Um, and here's the thing, it's really something you got to try and avoid. We all know some old cranky dude, the stereotype, get off my lawn, um, that just kind of hates the world. And you can take that road if you want to, and I'm sure there's a certain strength and whatnot in that, and I'm sure it makes a great shield, but it also causes stress. It causes isolation. Nobody wants to be around somebody who's a pain in the ass all the time. So getting away from it is a challenge, um, because we all have our pity parties. I talk about, there's times I have my pity parties. The late, great Christopher Reeves really empowered me when he shared that there were mornings where he would cry for 20 minutes. Because of the injustice of him being paralyzed, and then he would brush himself off and get on with the day. I think we have to allow ourselves that. I've talked in the past about the mourning process of mourning the old you and who you used to be and coming to grips with your new reality in life. Um, those things all help, but I really want to focus on the bitterness because if you meditate on it. It causes stress. Stress causes the uh, uh, cortisol, I believe it is. The stress hormone makes inflammation worse. For a lot of us, it will make our pain worse. I'm not suggesting your pain's all in your head, um, but it does certainly aggravate it. At least in my case, uh, I know God has a way of answering our prayers in strange ways because I used to be really intolerant. If the guy at McDonald's burned my fries, I was ready to, you know, really berate him and really let it ruin my day. And I prayed to get more patience and not be so angry. And God, in his sense of humor, put me in a position where me getting pissed off and stressed now causes me physical pain. So I avoided it almost all costs, which has made me a kinder, gentler individual. Which leads to my next point is if you are a chronic pain patient and you feel yourself falling into the bitterness and resentment, um, trying to find some good of it. I know that may sound far-fetched, but if you really try and step back, take an objective look, I think you will find certain benefits that have come via your chronic pain. For me, it's not very hard for me to find one. All I have to do is look at this platform that I've been blessed with, where I get to reach out to people who are also suffering. I get to try and be a light in dark places. And to be honest, it still brings me to tears whenever I receive a message from somebody telling me how I've impacted them positively, helped them, made things a little easier for them. Um, finding, I talked a couple weeks ago about finding comparative situations, finding something to be grateful for, having the I know it's almost a bumper sticker these days, but the attitude of gratitude. Sometimes you got to go globally. Sometimes I have to go all the way to thinking at least I don't have to walk hours to get fresh water every day and think of it on a global sense. Sometimes it's hard to break out of that funk. Um, Sometimes we like to wallow in our own misery, and misery loves company. You will always find people who will be more than happy to tell you how you're a victim and it sucks and poor you. And they may mean well, but it's easy to get lost in that. And to be honest, it's really counterproductive. Um, so I encourage you, don't be bitter. Try and find something positive in your life. Find a creative outlet. Reach out to other people. We live in this digital age where we're blessed with global communication that's instantaneous, and people report feeling more alone and isolated than ever before. And that's just not chronic pain people. That's literally everybody. So reach out to others. There's lots of great resources on the web. There's lots of Sam Moss has a really great group called Medical Musings that I've recently gotten involved with. There's wonderful people there. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe she's out of Australia. I don't know that much about Australian geography to know better than that, but she's on the other side of the planet. I run a group for people with spinal cord stimulators who are looking at getting them. I run several Facebook pages and YouTube channels. The links are in the comments. I put it up there. Um, Reach out, make some friends, make some digital friends, as I call it. Get involved. Try to have the best life you can, because sitting on the couch every day, pouting, watching Jerry Springer or daytime TV or whatever, where the only beautiful thing about that is the people on those shows are usually their lives are more screwed up than yours are. So that maybe makes you feel a little bit better, I guess. But trying to be involved in life as much as you can. And I understand I don't get out of the house much other than doctor's appointments, physical therapy. I don't get out much socially. But again, through this digital media and the internet, the relationships you make there don't have to be artificial and impersonal. So try and get as involved in life as you can. There are literally millions of us. There's no reason why we can't network and support each other and combat bitterness, depression, isolation, all of which can lead to terrible things like suicidal thoughts. They can exacerbate your situation and really compromise your quality of life. So that really pretty much winds it up. I don't have much else to talk about on this topic today. If you've got some tips or tricks that that have helped you fight off bitterness and helped you avoid being resentful and angry, I hope you'll share them in the comments. If you've got topics you'd like me to talk about in future shows, please also leave those in the comments. And with that, I'm going to give it just a minute here to see if the phone rings. If anybody does happen to call in, it doesn't happen often, but it always makes my day when it does. And I'm going to be heading out here in just a few minutes. I'll just share a little bit of personal stuff while I wait just a couple minutes to see if anybody calls. I am preparing to relocate from Las Vegas back to the Midwest. My wife and I are looking at southern Iowa. Basically, we can avoid the worst of the Minnesota winters and be closer to our family that's still back in the Twin Cities. It rarely gets below zero there, and they don't have snow that lasts for months at a time. I'm not looking forward to it being colder, but the joke was kind of on me. I moved to the desert Southwest here in Las Vegas, in part because when I couldn't deal anymore, I thought maybe I could get into the hosting or the hospitality angle of casinos a little bit, which only lasted about 18 months before everything got bad enough I had to quit working. And I never would have guessed that since we're only 4 hours from the West Coast, which I guess thinking of Las Vegas, I don't think of it being only 4 hours from the coast. When the monsoons go up the coast, the havoc they wreak with the barometric pressure still causes me pain and discomfort. So anyway, that's going to pretty much wrap it up for my show this week. I thank you as always for tuning in. I appreciate and respect the time that you spend with me. With that, Joseph of Borg, one love. I'm out of here.